A family stood on the platform at Arsberg Bridge Street, feeling like giants compared to the tiny setup of the station. They spent little time reading the railway's brochure when a fast but faint puffing was heard drawing nearer. From under the miniature bridge puffed a miniature train. At the front of the miniature train was a miniature engine, and behind it trailed a full but heavy set of miniature passenger coaches.
Dad, look, it's James the Red Engine! Wait, why is he so small?
Because my name is Mike, not James. Why does everyone get us mixed up? Can they not read my nameplates? I may be 10 times smaller than James the Red Engine, but I'm 10 times better.
Mike scoffed as the family struggled to find empty seats, then headed off for the last station. Once there, he idled onto the turntable.
You're getting heavier by the day.
And you must be getting older by the day.
Then, at last, the small engine shifted over to the water stand for a refill. His tender tank was only half full when the small controller came running up looking frantic.
Mike, we've got an unexpected guest boarding for your next train. Our landlord.
Landlord, sir?
A landlord is someone who rents out their land to someone in return for a monthly payment. But if he thinks the land isn't being used properly, he can kick out whoever's renting it at a moment's notice. He's just turned up at the booking office, and I've been occupied giving him a tour. He's from America, on a working holiday, so he says. I need you to be on your best behaviour, okay? And pass the word to the others if you have the chance to.
At that moment, the landlord shouted over, and the small controller cowered away to see what he wanted. Mike had never seen him act in such a way, and he eavesdropped in as he toured him around the works.
This is where most of our machinery is kept. I'm afraid you've caught us at a bad time, sir. We've been very busy completing orders from contractors elsewhere recently.
I see. Desperate for the money, are you?
Well, our main source of income comes from the ticket sales and goods work, but we also gain finance from charitable work and donations.
How nice.
The landlord murmured with little interest. He didn't seem to be caring to the railway itself much, but what it was running upon.
And this is our line's maintenance diesel, Frank.
And how many of these toy trains have you got?
It was lucky for them all that Frank was asleep and didn't hear a thing.
How shrewd! For a first impression, this landlord is making a very bad image for himself.
We have 7 in total. Our 4 main steam engines are Mike, Rex, Bert and Jock. Then we have 3 diesels, Frank, Blister 1 and Blister 2.
Now there's a name for a train engine. Blister. These rocks are giving me one just standing on them.
Well, that's our well-renowned ballast. It's one of the only kinds in the world that doesn't allow weeds to grow through it. Our railway is responsible for ferrying it from the mines to...
Do you earn a lot of income from that trade?
Well, most of the money from that contract is needed to maintain the railway infrastructure and the rolling stock fleet, so not too much profit, I'm afraid.
The landlord sighed and noted something on his phone.
Look, mister, you have a nice train set going here, I will say, but for the past 4 months you've been handing in your rent for the land past the due date. Now why is that, huh?
Well, sir, we've been short of funds these last few months after we invested in our new improved ballast chute over there. We've been meaning to buy the land from you ourselves, but...
But instead, you buy into an expensive child hobby and don't get enough out to pay for it.
The controller wasn't expecting this at all, but the landlord carried on nevertheless.
I'll be honest, this is not how I intended my land to be used. If the rent is handed in late for the next 3 months, I'll end our agreement. Got it?
Yes, sir, I understand. If you'd like to catch the next train, sir, it'll be leaving in 2 minutes, sir.
The small controller gulped as the landlord dug his heels into the ballast and turned for the train. Then he followed him to the platform, where Mike was seething with high-pressured steam and rage.
He's got some cheek to speak like that. Train set indeed. I'd like to show him a piece of my mind, let me tell you.
Now, Mike, I'm afraid I'm not going to let you do that, as much as I agree. What I need you to be is the nice and friendly steam engine that you usually aren't whenever this figure is around. He's quite the character. Just take him up the line now and prove to him what a lovely line it is too.
The guard gave the signal, and Mike smoked away with another full train. But try as he might, he just couldn't stop thinking about what the landlord had said about the railway, in which he cherished so much. Mike was a grumpy engine in general, but the driver noticed that today he was more enraged than ever. Eruptions of black smoke poured from his funnel, and no sooner had the landlord put down his phone to look outside, when a flick of soot struck him straight in the eye. He spent the rest of the journey struggling to get it out, and completely missed the scenic views that the railway had to offer. He got off at Marthwaite, where Bert was waiting in the loop to ship a train of loaded ballast hoppers down to the main station. Mike hissed steam furiously as he strolled over the crossing and clambered onto the workman's coach on Bert's train.
Good riddance!
They set off on the down journey back to Arlesdale. Unlike other railways, the trucks on the Arlesdale Railway were the best behaved and rolled along quite contentedly as Bert hurried over the River Arle. However, unlike other trucks again, ballast trucks on the Arlesdale Railway have a special door on the bottom to allow minerals to flow out and into the larger wagons on the main line. It wasn't Bert's fault, but today one of these doors wasn't secured properly. One of the workmen had not shut it safely, and as the train rattled over a bad piece of track, the entire door jolted open. Ballast was dragged out of the truck and tipped all over the line. It landed on the rails and hit the wheels on the still moving trucks. Before anybody knew what had happened, the last 5 trucks, as well as the workman's coach, were knocked off the track and came to a screeching stop, bruised, battered and broken amongst a pile of crushed ballast.
What on earth just happened? Hold on, when did he get on my train?
Out from the wreckage clambered the landlord. In his mind he was in a critical state, and was lucky to survive. He was dirty, dusty, and needed several stitches to a tear in his tailor-made waistcoat.
I am so sorry, sir. I had no idea this was gonna happen. Are you alright?
Alright? I've just been part of a huge train crash. How could I possibly be alright?
I just meant, are you hurt, sir? You seem fine to me.
Fine? I'm not made of metal like you, kid. I'm lucky to be alive right now. You could have killed me. I want to get back to the main station right now. I think I need another word with your manager.
I'm afraid there's roadworks as far as Bridge Street, and I don't think it's likely we can get a train past here for the next few hours, sir.
Great. Just my luck on this darn toy railroad.
As soon as the small controller found out about the incident, he cancelled all trains and sent Jock up to the rescue with the repair team.
Cheer up, Bert. This can't have been your fault. Accidents happen, mate, and sometimes there's nothing you can do to prevent or know of them. Manager is calling for a road crane to help put the trucks back on the track, but you've got to stay here and take them away.
Thanks, Jock. I don't think I'd really like to be running for the rest of the day with this person here. Good luck taking him back to the station. Huh, you'll need it.
Jock bounced along the line back to the main station and stoked the courage to have a word with the landlord on the way back.
You've got to be careful, mister. Telling Bert that accident was his fault? For all I know, it could have been you.
Say what now? I did no such thing. You've got some cheek talking to your landlord like that.
Jock was the youngest of the Arlesdale engines, only built in 1976, and often jumped conclusions far too quickly than he should. He was only trying to defend his friend Bert, but he had no idea what he was getting himself into.
Landlord? You don't look much like a lord if I ever did see one. Especially going and pulling a stunt like that. You should be ashamed of yourself.
You stupid engine. I don't think you know well enough who I am. You wait until I tell your controller about this. How dare you insult me like that?
Pfft, cold threats. What's the worst you could do?
Unfortunately, he did tell the small controller, who nearly fainted when he heard the news. That evening, he stood in front of his engine fleet and had a long, stern word with them all.
I am not pleased with what has gone on today, to say the least. I understand that none of you knew how important this man is to us, but no matter how important he is, should at bare minimal be treated like any other passenger. To hear that you are throwing insults out of your funnel, Jock, does not please me at all. Even Mike and Bert manage to keep level-headed, yet you go off and try and solve something that has nothing to do with you. As punishment, you'll be shut up in the shed until I say so, or I somehow forget this day ever happened.
Whilst this be going on, Rex sat quietly and contentedly in the middle berth.
Sir, why is this landlord here anyway? I thought the Fat Controller and the owner owned the railway.
I'm afraid that the Northwestern and Skarloey Railway only owned shares in the Arlesdale Railway as a business, but not the land itself. That belonged to a mining company that was keen for the railway to operate on it. As you remember, a few years ago, the mining company was in desperate times and sold the share of the land to an American tycoon, our current landlord. This is the first time he's visited the railway, and I'm afraid to say he didn't have a good impression of us.
Does that mean that he can get rid of the line then, since he owns the land?
Unfortunately, the short answer is yes. That's why I was so frantic that we proved how useful we were to both the mines and as a tourist attraction today.
The sheds fell silent in disbelief. Surely the line couldn't close. That would mean taking up every rail, every sleeper, until the place was clear and ready to be built on again. The engines knew now how important this landlord really was, and that in order to save their home, they'd have to treat him as if he were a king of the railway. The dawn sun rose to provide a welcome heat over the western coast of Sodor as a new day, a fresh start, began.
Come on, Mark. We're rusted for the first train. Let's get the coaches and go to the platform.
I'm too tired. Give me 5 more minutes.
In 5 minutes, you're due to set off. Come on. We need to let the passengers get on board.
What passengers?
Oh, you're right. Only a few minutes to spare and there's barely anyone here. That's not normal. I wonder what's up.
Morning, Mike. You don't look happy. Nothing new, I guess.
Hey! Apparently our railway might be shut down if we don't meet our landlord's needs. How unfair is that?
Well, that's rubbish. Surely you can't shut down a heritage railway. That's just stupid. Well, I guess if the other railway can close down so many branch lines and scrap so many healthy steam engines so quickly, anything is possible.
Thanks, Oliver. That helped a lot. Say, do you know where all my passengers are? The station's never been this empty.
Probably blocked down at the roadworks. It's been going on for at least a month now. Since it's only country lanes down these parts, there's traffic jams most roads leading up to the town. If I were you, I'd leave a couple of minutes late. Let whoever arrive, then make up for lost time later.
Fair enough. Will do. Thanks, Oliver.
Oliver was right. Because of the construction work taking place on the roads, a huge diversion meant that all traffic had to go along the same way. Mike didn't mind leaving purposely late, but soon woke up afterwards, with the wind brushing past his bumpers and his fire burning brighter. The morning air felt crisper than usual today. He loved it. It wasn't such a glorious scene near Farquhar Road. The roadworks diversion led along these country roads, and a steady flow of agitated drivers consistently drove by in hope to reach their destinations with no more delays. The railway met the road at an unmanned crossing. There were no gates, and so drivers were expected to keep an eye out themselves in case a train was coming. Often this is the way it is, but not quite always. A teenager was speeding down the road at a ridiculous speed, almost tearing down the speed signs. He bolted his way towards the crossing. Meanwhile, Mike roared along the rails at a high speed too, as he drew nearer and nearer to the crossing. Next thing, the inevitable happened. Mike felt his brakes slam on, but the momentum of the train surged him forwards. The careless teenager completely bypassed the train, which was too small to be seen from the driver's seat, and revved over the crossing relentless. The two vehicles went flying off their path. Mike had hit the car's back wheel, which spun out of control and off the road, whilst he himself was turned on his side, separated from his tender, and left sprawling across the ground until smashing into a stone wall beside the line. Mike's driver managed to crawl out of the cab to find steam gushing in huge clouds from all around him. He had a broken arm and a few cuts and bruises, but was more dazed by the incident than injured. Passing cars screeched to a stop and ran over to help out. The car driver was knocked unconscious, but otherwise unhurt. as were the few passengers that were on board the train. Very quickly an air ambulance was called, and the car and train drivers lifted to hospital, whilst Mike stayed on his side, his frames twisted and his smoke box dented. The small controller was in his office when he heard the news. As with the day before, he stopped all trains and rode with Frank up to the crash site to survey the damage. When he arrived, a lady in a high-vis jacket and laptop came over to see him. She was from the Train Accident Investigation Board and explained that her and her team were looking into what had caused the crash. They had only reached the crash site so quickly as they were in the area after investigating Bert's crash the day before. The small controller felt exhausted, giving them all the answers they needed. Only then was he able to see Mike, who was in too much shock to talk.
Cheer up, Mike. Like Bert's accident, this wasn't your fault. Just be grateful that nobody had been critically injured, and that this was all because of that reckless car driver. So you don't have to talk to any news reporters yourself. I've arranged for one of the Fat Controller's engines to pick you up and take you to their works. You'll be back on your wheels soon enough, I promise.
The other engines were horrified when they heard the news, and were even more saddened when Mike was lifted onto a well wagon later that day. Donald took him up to Croburn's Gate for immediate repairs. That car driver probably didn't know what hit him. Quite clumsy if you ask me.
Still though, Frank, it must be traumatizing for any younger teenager to be in a huge crash like that. The parents must be so worried.
What I'm concerned about is what it means for us. Mike will be repaired in time, sure, but what about the railway? Passengers won't soon forget a big crash like this. Our reputation is at risk here.
At that moment, the small controller slowly stumbled up. He glanced at the engines with a look that said he had serious news, and indeed he did.
The landlord was just on the phone. I'm afraid it's bad news. To put it short, he's closing us down.
What?
It seems this morning's incident, with the initial report by the Train Accident Investigation Board, have formed the final straw for us. The landlord has kicked out the railway. I suppose even if he hadn't, we wouldn't have been able to pay the rent for the land for the next few months, because we need to pay for Mike's overhaul, track repairs, and to mend the coaches and trucks.
But if the railway closes, what will happen to us? What will happen to you?
Either the railway is destroyed or moved to a new location. As for the volunteers, well, I suppose they'll just start volunteering somewhere else. Nothing can really be done. We've lost the land that our railway runs on, so we can't run it. We're trespassing in our own home.
The yard had never braced such a solemn and sombre tone. The engines, apart from Jock, were familiar with moving railways, as they had done so before they came to the Arlesdale line back in the 1960s. But after living there for over 50 years, they had become fond of their new home. The thought of it being ripped up was not pleasant, but what could they do? Word spread like wildfire. The next afternoon, Duck steamed into the yard at Arlesburg, where Rex was sitting in reminiscence of his life on Sodor. He sat on the quay running parallel to the Northwestern Railway, where the two had first met all those years ago.
Rex, is it true, what I've heard? Your railway's closing down?
Deplorably, yes. We have one more month of running before everything is taken down.
But surely there's something that can be done. I mean, over 50 years of preservation gone. I can't let that happen on my branch line.
You're going to have to. I'm afraid nothing can be done. You can't just beat these big overseas businessmen sometimes, no matter how much effort you've put in.
But Rex, you can't give in. What if you raised enough money to buy the land yourself? And then you could go by your own rules. I'll do what I can to raise the donations.
Do what you want, Duck, but you've got a month to do it. After that, the line will be ripped up.
But what about the ballast and the wool you deliver? Surely that's enough to pay for the land.
Duck, the mining company nearly went bust a few years ago, and they barely have any contracts for us these days, and the wool traffic is a seasonal trade. Forget it, Duck. I'm sorry, but there's no hope.
But if your line closes, what'll happen to you?
Don't worry about that. Our controller phoned the Romney, Hythe and Dymchurch Railway in South England today. They said they'd be more than willing to have us once we closed down.
At that moment, Duck's driver opened the regulator, and the pannier chuffed off to fetch his coaches. Never in all their friendship had Duck seen Rex so downhearted. After all, he was one of the most positive, lively little engines he knew. Despite trying to keep up spirits, the daunting reality of the situation seemed to drag him down. The Arlesdale Miniature Railway was making the most of its last working month in operation. Wherever they could, as many engines as possible were put on the trains for visitors to have one final run with them whilst the line lasted. Oliver spoke sympathetically to Bert when they next met.
I'm really sorry your line has to close, Bert. I just don't understand all this. Why do you need to leave? The railway should be built to last, not moved whenever someone disagrees to it. Henry once told me of an engine who said, if you ever leave these rails and it's not under your own power, you're in trouble. He's right, you know. So, when do you leave?
Well, we've not actually been sold yet, Oliver. We'll be stored in the shed for at least a month in case we needed to help take down the line. The small controller says it's a good time for us to have our annual steam test.
No, that's just cruel. Making an engine take down their own rails. This landlord of yours should be ashamed of himself. He'll regret closing you down. Or at least I hope he will. Anyways, Bert, I must be off. We will miss you when you're gone, you know.
On the very last day, Duck, Oliver, Donald and Douglas brought special trains filled with passengers, wishing to say their goodbyes. Jock, Bert, Rex and Frank sat outside the shed, whilst the two Blister twins scurried around organising the yards.
So, our last day. It would have been nice for Mike to have been here.
It would have been even nicer if Frank had bothered to wake up.
What? Huh? Ugh, did I miss anything?
Stay awake for a while, Frank. You can have a long sleep when this day is over.
Just then, a very smartly dressed small controller came walking up to the engines.
I'd like to take the opportunity to say it's been an absolute honour being your controller. We may have had our good and bad times. I remember every one of you who've come off the track. You've always been picked up and begun again. We may be in dark times now, but it's not just the railway that our landlord has closed. He's closed a truly remarkable place where all of you have carried on despite whatever has happened. To have such loyalty and trust is...
Sir, are you crying?
No, of course I'm not. I was just about to sneeze is all. Now, you all go out and make the best day your last. I mean, make your last day your best.
The engines were coupled in one long row, and the passengers flocked all over the station to get a good view as, Rex leading, they held a grand cavalcade with whistles and cheering all round. Many passengers wished them good luck, and took their photographs one last time. Then, as the day drew to a close, each engine was rolled back into the sheds, and the doors locked in front of them.
I've never known ye are so quiet, Oliver. It isn't the same happy atmosphere around here without them.
Oh, I know what you mean. With their line gone, I've noticed we haven't been getting a lot of passengers ourselves. We'll be next to close if it goes on like this.
This weather isn't helping much either. I've never seen so much rain. Having lived in the UK all my life, that's saying something.
A few days later, an engineer arrived to inspect the engines whilst the line was quiet. Each was in steam so that their pipes could be inspected for any steam leaks. Outside, the rain lashed against the shed doors and whistled through the gaps in the roof. Bert was being inspected when a branch broke against the shed window and shattered it to pieces. Bert jumped and let off a huge gush of steam. The inspector coughed and spluttered as the steam slowly cleared from the shed.
Boy, I feel sorry for whoever has to go out in that weather.
Meanwhile, out in the weather, the landlord was up at one of the mines. He was being shown round by one of the workmen to negotiate about the closure of the railway. The rain pelted down as the wind picked up stone dust and carried it around the deep cuttings of the mine.
Perhaps we should continue this meeting another time.
No way. I've got this soaked now. It can't get worse than this. I want to continue this tour and see what state this old shack is really in.
I don't think we should go any further. The rock faces may not be safe for all this rain.
Ah, pathetic. Looks solid as a rock to me. Come on, quit being a whim. I want to get this over and done with.
The poor workman stayed right where he was as the landlord boldly walked ahead. He couldn't hear it, but underneath him the stones crumbled with his weight. The rain softened the soil and made it easier for it to slip. It did.
Are you okay, sir? Sir?
No! Of course I'm not okay! I've just been part of a huge avalanche. How could I possibly be okay?
Didn't you mean a landslide, sir?
I don't care. It's pouring down with rain and... I think I've broken my leg. Get help, please! Would you?
This time, the landlord really had broken his leg and needed urgent hospital attention. The workman rushed to the mine office and snatched the phone.
Emergency service. Which service do you require?
So, ambulance, please.
Alright, please hold.
Caller, you have reached emergency services. How may I help you?
Hi, I've got a man here who's fallen down a cutting. I think he's broke his leg, but I'm not sure what else.
Okay, what's your location, please?
The Mayfleet mining complex on the western coast of Sodor.
Right, we only have one ambulance available and it's in Wellsworth at the moment. I can send it over to you, but it may take a few hours because there's roadworks north of Tidmouth. All other vehicles are out already, I'm afraid.
Can you not get here sooner? Send an air ambulance or something. It's literally not a good idea to leave this guy down there in the storm.
That's exactly why we can't send in an air ambulance, sir. The storms are just too fierce for that, I'm afraid. Is there any way you could get to Tidmouth? We can get a paramedic quicker if you can do that.
Okay, yes, I can do that. Can you tell the emergency service to meet us outside Tidmouth railway station? We should be there in about an hour or two.
The small controller stood in the engine sheds at Arlesdale, looking at the framed photos on the wall.
To think, nearly 50 years ago, the Reverend Audrey and Teddy Boston visited you lot and made a book about us. He'd be furious if he heard about what's happening. Times are a-changing, I suppose. Not much we can do to change that sometimes. The future knew this was going to happen. Hello, Arlesdale Railway Loco Sheds. Yes, I see. Well, we'll be there as soon as we can. Get him under cover if you can. We shouldn't worsen his mood any further.
Who was that, sir?
A call from one of the mines up the line. There's been a landslide and the landlord has broken his leg. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing this as an opportunity to prove ourselves, and I think so is the mines. We are essential to them as they are to us. Now, here's the plan. Rex, you're still in steam, aren't you?
Yes, I finished my steam test a few minutes ago.
Good. Take one of the covered coaches and head up the mines straight away. Bring a first aid kit with you, then bring the landlord back here. I'll ring the fat controller for one of his engines to meet you back here.
But, sir, we aren't allowed to run on the line anymore. The landlord made it perfectly clear that we are banned from running here after our last day.
He didn't mention about the case of an emergency, especially one involving him. We've done everything we could to stop all services on the line after our closure, but not at the risk of harming a life. Carry on, Rex.
Yes, sir. go. That landlord needs help, and we're the only ones who can help him. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, let's go!
He raced down the line, his driver struggling to keep up shoveling the coal as the miniature train rocked and swayed through the forest. He whistled at every crossing and straight past every station, which was silent anyway. They were over the speed limit, but it didn't matter. Who'd care? At long last, they reached the junction, and the driver ran in front to change the points, then drove on towards the complex.
Is that a train? I thought I banned this toy train set from running on my land.
You should be grateful. We're here to rescue you, sir. No ambulance can get this far in time, so this toy train right here is all you've got to get yourself to the hospital, whether you like it or not.
The landlord wisely shut up after that, and winced in over-dramatic pain as he was lifted into the coach. Rex ran round on the turntable again, then slowly and carefully headed back for home. He ran as smooth as he could back to Arlesdale, and made good time. Rain speared onto his smoke box and hissed as it wiped down his boiler, but the gallant little engine carried on. Even his own driver was impressed, and he braked the train into the yards just before the ballast chute, where Oliver was waiting with Isabel. Dawned on his lamp irons were two gleaming headlamps, one on each end of his frames.
Don't think I've ever worn express head coats before. I believe you have a patient for me.
You bet. He's just getting on board now. I tell you, Oliver, that was the best run I've had in my whole life. At least I've got one last happy memory before I leave. What a run that was!
Good on you, Rex. Anyways, must be off myself. Express passenger train here. Goodbye.
Oliver steamed away just as the clouds began to part. Through the bleak grey, a bold gold light shone upon the yards. The rain had stopped completely.
Huh, would you look at that? Of course the sun would shine at the end of the journey. Okay, never mind.
But the journey wasn't exactly over for Rex yet. Down the line, Oliver reached Tidmouth in good time, and the landlord met an ambulance crew on the platform, who took him away to hospital.
Wake up, you lot! I've got some news you may want to hear.
It's that other railway, isn't it? They've agreed to buy us.
Not quite, though something has been bought.
New parts for Mike or something?
No, guess again. It's right in front of you.
Sir, you haven't been bought, have you? Where are we going to work?
No, I've not been bought. But the ground we're standing on right now has.
I don't get it. Why would anyone want to buy a load of old soil and ballast?
Not exactly what I meant, Jock. We no longer have a landlord.
He died? I thought he had a broken leg.
No, Rex.
The small controller took out his phone and showed him a text message from the landlord. The engines didn't understand a word of it, so he explained anyway.
That landlord of ours has agreed to sell the land to our owner. We can now own this railway for good.
I thought he wasn't willing to sell the land to us. Besides, we don't have the money to pay for that, surely.
That's just the thing, Bert. After Rex went out to his rescue yesterday, he had a long, toy train of thought about his opinion on our business. As for funds to officially buy the land, well, thank your little western friends for that.
Jock and Oliver? How did they come into this?
They asked to Topham if they could help raise money to save the Arlesdale Railway. So in every train, passengers on the North Western have been donating, and online there's been a fund to help raise money for our little line. After he heard about it yesterday, our owner submitted the money to the landlord, who accepted it. Control has been relinquished to us.
The shed, and the entire yard for that matter, were alight with delighted cheers and claps. The Arlesdale Miniature Railway was preserved, and the little engines was to stay on Sodor. They had a lot to thank Duck and Oliver for. Each time they met, they whistled a happy greeting in respect. The line is now busier than it has ever been, and the landlord was never seen or heard of by the railway again, who are now independent and running strong. Mike returned, a year or so later, to a further celebrational gala, with a fresh boiler ticket and mended frames. The driver of the car that had collided with him is now recovered, and he's learnt his lesson. He now takes extra care whenever he's near the railway, even if it is just a toy train set. It may be a miniature railway, but it's definitely not one that should be underestimated.